All right, you're getting ready to go live with Everything PEO. We got Tim Russell, President of Enterprise HR, in the big seat this week. Thanks for sticking on for a good hour.
Can listen to the pros, making agents and business owners smarter every Wednesday on Everything PEO.
Hello, 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 Tampa Bay listeners and beyond. You're listening to Everything PEO, Money Talk 1010 AM. Well, the show is just so thankful. We actually just got our first show sponsor, Tim Russell, in the studio with us today. President and founder of Enterprise HR, certainly one of the, in my opinion, premier PEOs in the country, certainly one of the longest running privately owned PEOs in the country. Thanks so much for you, Tim, for coming in this hour.
Thanks for having me.
And being a part of the show since its infancy stages. I know you've been through here a couple of times, and summer break is over. We're finally getting back to the goodies every Wednesday, 6 p.m., Everything PEO brought to you. So like always, we always take a moment to thank last week's guests. I want to do a quick shout out. We had Chris Sullivan and Meredith Burns with Sons Insurance come in the studio talking everything risk management, loss control, and really that critical role that it plays in workers' comp. You know, we were talking about this a little bit off air, Tim, and, you know, obviously you've owned a PEO going on 20 years now?
23 years.
23 years. Yeah, we were doing a quick math in the studio last week between Chris, Meredith, and I. We had over 70 years PEO experience in the studio. I was feeling very old in that moment, but it really is the whole ballgame.
Yeah, it is. And you know, the only thing that matters, because I was just talking to you about it, you know, payroll's easy. Anybody, any company can do payroll and do it cheaper than the client can. The whole game is the insurance policy and the risk that it carries.
Yeah, it shocks me that in 2023, you know, PEO's been around since the 70s, really took traction in the 80s. And Florida is more or less like the mecca of PEOs. It really kind of all started here. It really is a trendsetter nationwide as these PEOs develop, evolve, enhance in Florida, and then you see that trickle out west. But you know, still to this day, you know, PEO advisors, you know, and really the show brings just opportunity everywhere. It shows PEOs contacting us from all over the country, and you still have a moment where even the PEO does not have a risk manager, you know, in the building. You know, they submit it to the carrier, do a formal underwriting process, and yet the carrier's approved it, so we'll write it. And it's scary. It's almost dangerous to think that they can operate that way.
Without a good risk management, you have very few options. You have to overcharge and just be successful by horsepower. You have to roll the dice and hope that you catch a couple of good years so that you can save some money. Or you have to really, really manage. You can manage it on the front end by saying, hey, look, we're not going to take underwater demolition. Okay, there's no reason for that. Okay, but once the injury happens, once you've taken it, the injury happens. That's really where the money is.
Yeah, I like that analogy, roll the dice. I say this often. You know, workers' comp is really kind of like a craps table, right? You're rolling the dice. You're going to have good years and bad years, and no matter how safe you are, no matter how much safety, you know, training, you know, OSHA standards, signage, every, you know, gadget there is under the sun, you know, unfortunately, claims will happen.
Oh, I could go on for hours and hours about freak injuries and injuries that are life-changing for our employees. And most of the time, you know, the injury is ours. We have to pay for it. We have to collateralize it going forward. We have to account for it going forward, whether we take that type of risk or not. But we've had injuries where people walk in clear skies, get struck by lightning. Literally struck by lightning, and there's nothing you can't account for that.
Yeah, I think that's the truest definition of a shock loss out there. I mean, it's a freak accident or not, or even, you know, bonehead or not. I mean, employees make mistakes, they have forgetful moments, and, you know, breaking employee protocol or safety guidelines doesn't negate the benefit. You know, that's what we're in. We're in the, you know, insurance of insuring claims, and it's unfortunate, but it's really the elephant in the room, and it's bound to happen. And, you know, we were talking about this a little bit last week, having a healthy carrier. And I know we're going to kind of dabble into some of the proposed rate reductions coming up in Florida for next year. But having a healthy, strong PEO or a healthy carrier is part of the game, you know, because if they're not there to fulfill their obligations, right? And I get there's a Florida guarantee fund and there's always some kind of a backup if the carrier were to go down. But, you want really kind of both client and PEO operating, smartly with this practice.
Yeah, for many years, I was pretty convinced that the actual state, at the state level, they didn't understand workers' comp very well. And I still think that's true. A carrier could operate in the state of Florida and basically deceive the state into thinking they're more healthy than they are. The carriers that are out there now are actually very good at what they do without the regulation. As a matter of fact, the regulation hurts them a little bit. But right now, we're in a period of softness in the marketplace, mainly as far as carriers coming in, because the compensation to be an insurance carrier in the state of Florida is not there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what we were saying, something like over the last 20 years, the rates are down
77%.
77%.
For an injury that I would have taken in 2003, it would have brought in $100 in premium on that payroll. Today, instead of getting that $100 in premium, I would get $23. And I can tell you that there's nothing you can buy today that's cheaper than it was.
Right.
20 years.
Right. What happened to inflation in the space? Now, I remember, kind of looking at it in the 80s, there was 2 years back to back where there was double-digit rate increases, but so.
And those are coming again.
It has to, right? I mean, it simply.
Well, look, we could say, hey, it's got to increase. In 1 year, we're going to be right. Okay. So, there's no, you can't predict it. Okay. But there is no political, and this is what it is. There is no political appetite to fairly compensate the risk that a carrier has to take to be legal in the state of Florida. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. So, and I know we kind of got ahead of ourselves there, but NCCI, that's the National Council on Comp Insurance, more or less our governing body. This is the body that dictates the codes. Everything's code specific. Roofing has its own workers' comp code. Painting has its own code. Clerical, office, all the above. And they kind of define what falls in these codes and ultimately the price each year. Now, this is a nonprofit, right, funded by the carriers to supposedly be a neutral body. And I certainly don't know the algorithms and the formulas, but I believe it goes something like, claims paid out versus premium in. They analyze that on a yearly basis. And then based on how that trends, the rates can go up or down. Now, Florida is literally facing 9 out of 10 years having a decrease. As Tim just mentioned, we're literally at a point where the rates are 80% down over the last 20 years. And they've been going up or down, a point here, a point there. But this 15.4% proposal for 2024 almost starts to seem erroneous. Now, a few years back, Florida had a cap on how much attorneys could bill. And there was kind of a yo-yo effect to this where workers' comp injury attorneys didn't want to take on the cases. They were maxed on how much they could bill. It got to the point where they didn't even want to take these on. And then the indemnity portion, the wage reimbursement portion of these claims would cap at 2 years, and then it got extended to 5. And I think everyone kind of playing in this field thought this was going to finally be the benchmark that turned these reductions around, right? Everything costs more. Medical bills, supplies, ambulance rides are more. Everything's more, and now the attorneys are back to billing what they want, and indemnity benefits went up by 2.5x, and yet here we are now facing the barrel of another massive reduction.
So this is a recommendation by NCCI. Normally, and almost 100% assuredly, the state is going to take the 15.104, I forget what the number is, and could be more. The state could say, hey, look, we're just going to do 20%. And let me tell you how bad the math is on this. You don't know the algorithm, but I can tell you exactly what this 15% is. They took the losses from 20 and 21, and then they took the year-end financials for 22 and said, hey, we're down on claims. Well, nobody was working.
Yeah.
Nobody, and especially no one was working in construction, right?
Sure.
So they took this good news, quotes, good news of claims being down, and then they added a cherry on top. Anything that was COVID, any injury, any claim, any workers' compensation dollar that went, and it had a little tag on it that said COVID, was counted as catastrophic. And they don't put it in the formula. So not only did they take less money in premium into account and less claims into account, they removed the specter of all these COVID claims completely from the equation and said, look, we're doing great. We can give our small businesses a 15% discount. And everybody in Tallahassee is all for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly making someone look good,
Oh,
right?
it does.
We monitored, we got claims under control, right? But really, this is hurting businesses. And I know the business owner champions the reduction, and they're frothing at the less premium next year. But really, it's getting to the point where carriers are leaving the state. They're getting to the point where it's so low that it's becoming tough to find insurance. Now, us being in the PEO space, it's not necessarily tough for us. It's really, force feeding tons of businesses out of the standard market and into the PEO space. And thank God there's a carrier cap on how many policies. I believe it's only 10% of their book they're allowed to put a consent to rate at a higher, rate point on their policies. Otherwise, that would probably be rampant this year. But I don't think that conversation's really being had out there that, yes, the rates are proposed, and it is just an average, right? It's a proposed average, meaning some could be more, some could be less. But if that blend really comes in at 15% and change,
it will. They're going to take the recommendation, and it could be more.
I mean, think about, PEOs, like you were saying off break, that are already pricing at such heavy discounts, and now they need to continue to honor the 15.4 reduction and honor possibly a 20% discount to the rate. I mean, when I got in this business, roofing was literally over 60% per $100,
$66,
and this renewal will take it under 10.
I won't ride a roofer to save my life.
Yeah, I mean, again, an ambulance ride on average $10,000, a broken arm on average $25,000. It's nearly impossible. I almost never see $1 million premium anymore. 10 years ago, we would look at dozens per year. So, at what point, how do you stop the trend? Is it simply voting? We got about 3 minutes before break, but is it getting the man on top out of office? Is this a legislative matter? What do you think cracks this code?
The problem is people don't understand pennies. So as a company, I am a very high risk PEO, and my dollar average for workers' comp is about 7%. So as a business owner, if you have $100 in payroll, you have to pay me an additional $7 for your workers' comp premium.
Okay.
At a good sized company, let's say it's 10 employees, they all make $800 a week. That's $8,000, right? That's $560 to insure your employees for $20 million worth of workers' comp insurance. That $560 I get, it would have been over $10,000 20 years ago. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the fact that we're old enough and we've got a big enough pool of employees now, we can manage it. For a new PEO, a new carrier, or a business that, God forbid, ever went without, it's devastating.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line out there, and it's really getting to the point where now even the PEOs are at the point where whether they pull out, heavily restrict the industries they write too.
It's adverse selection at its worst. We can talk more about out after the break, but you're going to restrict carriers, you're going to restrict clients, you're going to restrict business in general, and it's all for pennies.
Yeah, I mean, we really are. There's 2 or 3 industries out there that if just one carrier pulls out of it, there's nothing left but to stay pull. We're getting to the point when I had dozens of outlets for some of, tree trimming, even towing, repossession work. When I got in this industry 20 years ago, I could put that at 15 PEOs. Now I'm down to literally 1 or 2. And, if they have a bad year on these codes and decide to make that ultimate decision, I don't think some of these industries realize how fragile it really, really is out there.
And how expensive the alternative to a PEO is.
Yeah.
If you can't get PEO coverage, get ready.
Yeah. Of course, the state, if you can't find private insurance out there, the state is, quote unquote, guaranteed to write you something. But it comes at a hefty surcharge. Now, even that's kind of come down to planet Earth. I looked at an old quote from years ago where JUA Tier 3 surcharge used to be 139%. I think this year it's in the 80s, but everyone's kind of down, and it's literally unexplainable. But that kind of summarizes it, right? 15.4, 15.1, whatever that proposed rate reduction is, but it's actually going to hurt these business owners. Stay tuned for plenty more coming back with Tim Russell, Enterprise HR. We'll see you after the break.
thing. Because with Vistaprint, the printabilities are endless. Print it all.
All right, we are getting ready to come back on with Tim Russell here in the studio. Thanks for sticking around, folks. All right. You are back on with Everything PEO, Money Talk 1010 AM, brought to you by Enterprise HR, one of the nation's premier and longest running privately owned PEOs in the country. Man, Tim, we just got right into it last segment. I was like, frothing. But for any of our listeners that maybe didn't catch your show a few months back or are familiar with you, let's tell them a little bit about yourself. And really, I always like to start this conversation on how you ended up in the PEO space.
It's a long story like anybody else's, but I had a construction company for a long time, sold it, and my family was involved in the PEO space. It was right at the moment, it was 2000, it was right at the moment that we lost, Florida mostly lost the coverage. In 2000 as much like it is today in 2023. So the major carrier for all of PEOs went out of business. We found coverage on a company in New York, and we were in business. I had a huge Rolodex. I sold $100 million worth of payroll by myself, and then started shooting it off to brokers.
Yeah, it's funny. It's very few people, however, they work their way into this space, rarely ever leave. Right? I kind of call PEO advisors almost like a trade school. It's like ITT tech. You come in, you figure out the puzzle, and either you stay with it or you pivot to go on your own. And we've helped lots of folks go on and do that, and that's awesome. And we're proud of that. Eric, my partner, and I are proud of that. But it's a funny thing, this PEO space. It's a tough industry. It's a 90% failure rate industry, not necessarily by how hard it is, but due to the financial lag and the tenaciousness that it really takes in sales. But when you can get over that hump, it truly is a great business. And just helping these business owners more than they realize. It's almost kind of like being a loan officer, subprime lending, and afterwards they get the house. It's like, thank you, and there's that same gratitude when you keep someone out of the JUA or lower their costs by $40,000, or keep them on the job, right? And
yeah, I mean, I've never really had a job. I've always done my own thing. I understand small business really well. We have saved and created probably more businesses than I can imagine. PEO is unusual. It is something that sits in the background. And if you don't have it, it's a problem for some businesses. I think it's only really effective for maybe 20% of businesses out there. For the longest time, PEO has only been 4 to 6% of gross payrolls in general. And it's been that number for a long time. Huge businesses generally can't use this. PEO generally sits in the 10 to 50 employee range. I don't even like the 50 range. I like 0 to 10. 0 to 10 makes me happy. I can manage it well. I know the benefits of that. I can do it cheaper than they can. I can manage it well.
Yeah, I'm always interested because every PEO is no different than any carrier, right? They have a niche and they have a preference. What happens at that 50 and up that turns you off to it? If you don't mind me asking.
There's a couple of things, and we're going to talk about it later. At 25, you start to get into federal regulatory employment problems. At 50, there's another set of problems that come along. For me, I recognized it one day. I started my construction business in a park, and we built it up to pretty significant business. I remember walking into the office one day, and the receptionist was new, and she wouldn't let me behind the desk. And right then I knew, okay, the business is getting big. This is a problem. And what I experienced from hiring all these subcontractors is when we hired small subcontractors, generally the guys had the same last name. But once we started hiring subcontractors that had 30, 40, 50 employees, what we noticed was if one guy got a check for workers' comp, it started a chain, a chain of misery where everybody started asking for workers' comp claims. Whether they were true or not, that's another argument. But I know that, if I got an injury from a company that had 3 guys, it was a real injury. Okay, and his brother or his dad wasn't going to do the same thing.
Yeah. We had Pat Cleary on over the summer, president of NAPEO, National Association of PEOs, and we were going through kind of the analytics, And he's been at the helm about 12 years. He's literally seen the PEO industry quadruple under his watch. And still to this day, with all those benchmarks being met, 50% of employees that are getting payroll through a PEO reside in just 3 states: California, Texas, Florida.
It's mostly legislation, and it's and the other part of it is growth. 1,000 people a day move to Florida. 1,500 people a day move to Texas. 700 people a day move to North Carolina. And they're moving from, non-political. They're moving from states that are not favorable for small.
Now, I don't know if it's coincidental, but those are also the top most 3 fraudulent states, right? And so I don't know if that makes it a good fit. I mean, obviously it started in Florida, had nothing to do with politics or anything else. These guys came up with a concept. There was 5 of them. They split up. One guy went north a mile, east a mile, south a mile, west a mile. That's kind of how you have PEO Road down there in Sarasota area. But, I think it just works well. It's actually surprising to me with Texas being the only state where they don't actually mandate workers' comp to have such a big presence there. You would think it just falls off the radar like a lot of those states in the Midwest. But
I'm not for. I don't agree with any federal legislation. It's very difficult to manage. The state of Texas does what they do. Okay, but here's what happens: you work in a state where they don't require comp, and as a business owner, let's say you don't protect yourself with a legal liability or shield yourself from adverse risks, and you get a real injury. Somebody falls off of a roof and breaks some bones. You're on the hook for that injury.
yeah, no, I go back to my first year in doing this. I had signed up a structural welder and had been in business a long time, but was on the job site that day. I just walked right up to him. Back, that's how we used to do it back in the old days. Walk around with carpenter pencils and T-shirts. Where's Hefe? Hit you right there on the site. And he's like, well, I've got 50,000 I've got to put aside. And if I ever have a comp claim, this will be what it's used for. Got him to sign up, got him to really believe in the concept. Had over 350,000 in claims the first year we were together. So I don't know if I was his bad luck curse or his savior, but considering we just went through some quick analytics, an ambulance ride, 10,000, average broken arm, 25,000, 50,000 wouldn't get you very far. And doing structural welding to boot, these guys are climbing up 5 stories on red iron beams. It just seems nuts that the state would think these contractors, Texas I'm talking about, would have enough fiscal responsibility to be able to self-insure these claims. I mean, how is this not bit them in the butt to the point where they finally have to change this trend?
Well, you got to remember that in every state's different and every PEO is different, but about 30 to 40% of any claims that we have come in are wholly or partially fraudulent. So when we get an injury and we do the initial blood screens and start doing our backtrack, our risk management after the fact, we find out that they've been injured before or the same injury or whatever reason. We don't have to pay either any of the claim or dramatically different than what is first thought. Now, ambulance rides and all these they're non-negotiable. Okay, it's assigned a number. You're going to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, mm-hmm. Unless you're not on the hook. If the person's not an American citizen, if they're not our employee, there's a bunch of if the tox screen comes back, they're high. We don't pay. But in the state of Texas, the fraudulent number is much higher.
Sure, I can imagine, especially now. I mean, right? It's tough. Well, so let's kind of throw this out there. I mean, obviously, this is a business talk station. We're live streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're trying to connect with business owners and agents really all over the country. If you for any of them that are maybe hearing this for the first time and considering a PEO, what would you say? I'd love to hear your answer on this. Kind of the biggest feature benefit that you would bring to their attention with a PEO.
I don't think I've ever met a trade person, skilled trade, and that's a wide range. Guy makes a really good pizza. Guy owns a gas station. Guy can connect electrical wires. That's a trade. Okay, I've never met any of them that were better at payroll than I was. Okay,
fair.
So here's the deal: you call in payroll to us, or any PEO in general. My wife will probably argue with me about that, but I think that's about a 5-minute process, beginning to end. Okay, there is no way an electrician is going to do payroll in 5 minutes. I'm cheaper right there. Your time is worth way more than
yeah.
My unemployment rate is cheaper. You're going to get my comp rate is cheaper. You might get some of that if you're a safe country. But at the end of the day, you don't have employees. They're my employees. You rent them from us for a known price, which is another benefit because now you do your cost much easier. When you employ a PEO, hopefully what you get is you get a time savings, you get an assurance that your employees will be safe and taken care of if there's a problem, if there's an injury. And overall, I can do it cheaper than you. I would look really stupid trying to wire my house. That would look horrible.
Yeah.
You know, that's the same thing with them. They're doing payroll, comp, unemployment. They're doing HR. They're doing all these things that they're no good. And we're not only are we cheaper, we'll pass that along. We're actually cheaper.
Yeah, the legal liability transfer is huge, right?
Yes.
And especially if you go down the path of claims management, right? Whether it's an unemployment claim or a workers' comp claim, yeah, they know the skill trade. Maybe they got QuickBooks to do payroll. Maybe they find some way to level that out. As I don't see it as much as a benefit, but then you go down the path of managing claims, safety awareness, all the tools that the PEOs bring, site reviews, OSHA standards,
Lack of audit.
yeah, self-audit, huge, right? I mean, rarely are they good at paperwork.
Yeah, and look, if you want to be a two-man operation the rest of your life, I love it. I'll take you. I'll help you. This, that, and the other. It's going to be very difficult to grow from 2 to 200 or to 2 to 20. It's very difficult to scale a business, okay, and not have your time eaten alive by paperwork.
Well, you're listening to Everything PEO on Money Talk 1010 AM. We're brought to you by Enterprise HR, one of the nation's premier and longest-running privately owned PEOs in the country. We've got about 6 minutes or so before break. Over the summer, July 1, Senate Bill 1716 really came into effect. I'd love to hear about this from you. And for those that aren't aware, it was a mandate for employers 25 and up to do E-Verify, which is an electronic verify system of their status, right? The registered alien, illegal alien. Obviously, this has become a big hot button over the summer. And technically, Florida was an E-Verify state, this whole time, just not enforced, more or less. But have you seen any changes in the industry? Has this really been a disruptor?
Oh yeah, and just between me and you, our deal
and the audience.
But between you sending me clients,
right?
Oh, prospect,
sure,
and you telling me, hey, these clients don't want to do this. They don't want to fill these forms out, and that goes back to the paperwork. For 20 years, I forced all of our brokers to collect all of the paperwork that was federally and state mandated. To almost no avail. In 20 years, I never had an in-person INS search. I've had so few requests, I can't even imagine it. The E-Verify is literally a paper type. No one uses it the way it's supposed to. The only thing it does is relieve me from an injury for a person who lies about being a citizen. And that gets me. Yeah. So we just stopped taking them. We don't have to take them. We don't have a lot of clients who have more than 25 employees. Really, you can't take a waste of time.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Obviously we work with a handful of PEOs, Tim, and several of them have amended their paperwork and shifted this liability to the client company. And I would say understandably so. Let's be real here. They never meet the employee. They don't ever see photocopies of their IDs. How can they, in effect, be asked to verify the I-9 form? Which, for anyone that's listening not familiar with this form, it's a post 9/11 citizenship verification form where they have to list their social, their resident alien card, IDs, 3 forms, blah blah blah. And sure, if the PEO has an I-9 audit, it's a slippery slope. For the first time ever, after the Senate bill came out, the words holding PEOs liable started getting kicked around. So I think it was obviously the only decision to do was to put this onus on the client company. It's also a form that you're supposed to keep up to 7 years. Is that correct?
You got to keep it a while. I'm not going to confess to the 7-year thing, but if you don't have it, it's a real problem. I rarely do you see a fine. It's usually punitive because the company is just absolutely.
Yeah. There used to be a point when I got in the business 20 years ago where they would just spot check a couple of apps, and if the social bounced back, then they may look at them. Of course, that was, deemed discrimination, and it became an all or nothing. Of course, due to keeping the files moving, keep burning, it was a nothing and only reactive almost.
It's a solution. It's a solution that looks for a problem, and everybody knows that there's fraudulent workers out there. This isn't the way they attack it.
Yeah, I know we don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but do you think by getting out of collecting I-9s or playing this game that you've lost an edge in the sense of fighting off some of those claims? Is that fair? Is that handcuffing you guys at all?
No. Once we determine that the person is not an American citizen or not legally able to work in the United States, we're generally off the hook.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got 2 minutes before break. I wanted to bounce this off you. We talk about this a lot. We've been around since the 70s, right? We're bailing out business owners all over the country. Why do you think there's still, a connotation almost that PEOs are a second tier option? Why so many insurance agents out there still look at it as an absolute last resort when, in fact, we partner with agents all over the country and we provide a solution to them when they have none.
It's apathy, and it's the way things are done.
Yeah.
So what happens is an agent gets into the game. They're taught by another agent. They're taught by an agency that's done it this way for 10 years. But they were taught this is the way we've done it for 50 years. They can't see the benefit because the agency, I don't care what they say. They don't care about the client. They want the check. Okay. And here's the deal. You don't get a big check for writing a comp policy.
Not anymore.
Not unless it's a gigantic policy.
Right.
When you try to express to an agent that, hey, look, we're going to provide better coverage. We're going to manage it better. You don't have to be involved in it. And not only are you going to get a better check, but it's a better solution for your client. They don't believe it until they actually see it.
Yeah. I think it's a foreign concept, but I think at the end of the day, all of us, insurance agents, PEO brokers, would all take that oath in a sense. It's an unwritten oath, but the oath of putting our best option forward. Whether it's with me, whether it's through a PEO, it's our job to do this client company the best we can, find the best solution. And I get that they all put on their pants every day to make a living. And sometimes there's a feeling of by handing that off, I've taken that ability away, or maybe they have a quota to make it work. But I feel like this show is almost born for that educational purpose. One show at a time, we try and educate business owners and insurance agents on why this solution is not second tier. Why a savvy insurance agent really, if they were smart, on every proposal would put a standard market option in front of their client and a PEO option in front of their client. Because if you don't, someone else will. That's the time we're approaching, especially with this rate reduction coming in. There could be, a big awakening coming. All right. Plenty more coming back with Tim Russell. We got one more segment in the day. Stick around, folks. Thanks so much.
paper bags, anything. Because with Visprint, the printabilities are endless. Print it all with 25% off for new customers with code NEW25 at Visprint.com.
All right. We are back. Everything PEO, Money Talk 1010 a.m. In the studio today, Tim Russell, president of Enterprise HR, certainly one of my favorite PEOs. Tim, before we jump back into it, I wanted to go over this article that we tripped over today. Erin Cornicker, executive producer on the show, she's always finding us little tidbits. And I've never even heard of this entity, FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Are you familiar with FinCEN?
Yeah, it's the enforcement agency for the SEC, FCC. You commit a federal crime, that's the people that come after you.
Yeah, well, they are calling attention to payroll, tax evasion, workers' compensation fraud, really, and pinpointing it in the construction sector. So they go on to say that every year across the United States, basically millions of dollars of state and federal payroll tax and workers' comp premiums are being dodged due to these schemes, right? And certainly tax evasion and workers' comp's on the forefront all the time, but these schemes are perpetrated through the use of basically putting a shell company in there, lowballing your employees, lowballing your premiums, cash under the table, kind of all of the above. And I know we had another big wave the last few years where someone wants to sign up, get put on unsecured payroll status, put every employee on direct deposit, 30, 40 employees, they all get their direct deposit, and then they bounce their first payroll and bail. And it's certainly nasty business out there, but it was just, it's good to see they're finally starting to crack down on this. We had a case right before we took summer break where they made the lady, very similar situation, liquidate all her assets, sell real estate. And I'm sure they only recovered pennies on the dollar of what it could have been, but it was something like $6-7 million in fines. And it's just shocking. I mean, we were just talking about how literally the rates are down 80% from 20 years ago. And the government's really doing their very best on getting it to you so affordably to a level. There's no point in cheating anymore. I guess it depends what you're asking, but like if it's never been cheaper, right? Isn't that the catalyst to promoting to do it the right way?
There's always going to be criminals. They're going to want to do. There's always going to be a guy that will do it for cash, do it with non-legal workers, do it with cheaper materials, and do it in a substandard fashion. There's always going to be that. Okay. This article, and I haven't read much of it. It would be a good step. I've never seen the federal government actually enforce anything at a federal level that is effective. But so here's the grand overview of what happens when you take 15% of the revenue out of an insurance situation. So you have less insurers willing to come into the marketplace, giving you monopolies, which is exactly what they're trying to avoid. They're trying not to be the insurance of last resort at the state level. So you've got less insurers. So now you've got less money coming into those insurers that don't allow them to effectively manage stuff. So that they'll over-reserve. They'll do whatever it takes to stay afloat. And when they over-reserve, they charge me. And when they charge me, I don't take it out of my pocket. I will charge more to the client.
Got to roll downhill.
And for the PEOs or for the employee leasing companies that have trapped themselves with these dramatically discounted rates, when they lose 15% of their dramatically discounted rate, it becomes a real problem. Now, what are they going to do? Then you lose PEOs. As you lose PEOs, now you have monopolies, which is exactly what people are trying to avoid. There has to be enough money in the system to pay for this because the medical bills don't go down. The lawyers don't work for free. We have to pay them. There's injuries. They have to be paid. With this amount of money coming into the system, it is non-sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, and if you think about it, we had Kelly Anderson in here a few weeks back, co-founder of Florida Resource Management, and he was kind of going through the steps of a claim. And I mean, it's amazing how many people actually get paid off of a claim. You know what I mean? Between the doctors, the therapists, the nurse case managers, the paperwork pushers, the follow-up visits. I mean, it's like 30 people are getting a cut out of that.
I have a really good example of how that works. We had a surgery that happened on one of our clients, and it was our injury. But we discovered that, and don't hold me to the number, but you can hold me to the extremeness of it. We had a person in the operating room that I believe was a phlebotomist or something to that effect. Got paid over $18,000 for an outpatient surgery. So we went backwards and started dialing everybody involved in this and figuring out where this money started, because it was an outrage. It was a claim that should have been $40,000. It was $400,000. So we finally got to the person who adjusted the bill and said, "Hey, can you explain this to us?" And the first words out of her mouth were, "What do you care? It's workers' comp."
Oh, geez.
That's the feeling. It's a never-ending gobstopper of money because it's the best insurance on the planet. Workers' comp is better than any health insurance on the planet because it's going to medically make you 100% if it can.
Mm-hmm.
They'll pay whatever it takes. And I'm the guy on the other end writing the check. And nobody cares about who's paying it or how it gets paid. It just gets paid.
Yeah, I mean, and they're certainly not taking into consideration how PEOs are sharing in the loss, sometimes up to $500,000 million deductibles. A 15% hit to the premium if you've got a $500,000 deductible. I mean, I don't care what industry you're in, that's a big number.
It is. Again, it goes back to the pennies. The legislature wants to say to the citizenry and to the business organizations, the small businesses, "Hey, look, we just saved you 15 points. You saved 15 points of that 6% that I told you about, okay? And the costs have gone up 30%. You just don't know it yet because the bills haven't happened for the injuries. We get bills for injuries today that happened 5 years ago."
Yeah, no, I believe it. We had a grocery store that we had signed up a few years back. It was a chain of the Bravo supermarkets, and they would have these things come in literally 90 days, 120 days on the regular, 6 months after the fact. And their carrier, and of course, the business owner wants to step up and no, let's deny, let's fight. They're handcuffed, right? And the carrier is going to do what they want to do, and it's cutting that check to make it go ways easier. Eventually.
Well, that on an independent level, at a client level with a carrier, that's true. When you've got a PEO as a buffer, we have a lot of say in what the carrier does because being in business for 23 years, I can tell you that probably less than 10 times I've gone into my carrier's retention. 99.9% of the hundreds of millions of dollars that we've paid out has gone on us. Okay? The carrier, they get their premium, okay, and that's how they operate. Very rarely do they reach into their own pockets for my injury because we manage the injury correctly. And to Sun's credit, who is our carrier, they allow us to do that and trust us to do that. They watch us. They make sure we got enough capital to do what we want to do. But to their credit, they allow us to operate in an open space. We pretty much manage our own interests.
What's the secret sauce, Tim? I mean, we just went through a pandemic. Tampa Bay, Florida is one of the most saturated markets. It's a tight market. There's tons of PEOs in this space. Costs are going up at every turn, rent, blah, 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 blah. And now premiums are down 80%. But yet Enterprise has really been able to, be one of the best and strongest PEOs through this time. I mean, how are you setting yourself apart?
As a company, it's a family-owned company. We're very financially conservative. We've saved our money for a long time for rainy days. It's raining, and it might for a while. It might, but when these bills come due and these premiums don't pay it, okay, the rates will go up, and it won't be 15%. They'll go back to 2000. I mean, history repeats itself. It's going to go back to 2003. Mm-hmm. It might take a couple of years. I don't think you're going to see 100% rate increase at any point in time, but I think you see 4 or 5 years where it goes up. And guess what? Everything goes. I mean, every single thing that you buy, right? A gallon of gas, home insurance, property insurance, all these insurances are going up, and injuries are going down. No.
It's funny, when I got in this business, I was told exactly what you're saying, right? The pendulum swings too hard, too soft, credit too tight, too loose. Like every industry has this, ebb and flow. But I have not seen that.
Well, and the worst thing about this, and this is really getting granular, at the state level, the state controls how much of a profit an insurance company can make.
Say that again?
A lot of people don't realize this. So as an insurance carrier, you make your filings and the state tells you, okay, look, you're allowed to make on premium as a business 5%. It's not some big number. It's not like you think it is, okay?
Right.
They've actually this year reduced the number. One of the proposals was 0%, and the reason for it was because another thing that they allow insurance companies to do or invest money. They're saying investment is so easy and so lucrative right now in your capital that you reserve that you'll make enough money to make care more than your 5%. How do you like us now?
So they're hedging the bet that with those reserves laying around that you'll be able to make smart, proper investments, have the money back when it needs to be, almost like how banks do, right? They're not living off the $35 NSF fees. They're taking what's sitting in the kitty and essentially investing that in other things to make their mark. So the margin is low as 3 to 5%.
It's low. It's a very low number.
And now they've kicked you in the teeth with 15% hit to that on average.
Yeah, and in addition to that, they know that the big number's coming. They know that the day's going to turn, and they can't make COVID go away. The numbers. Oh, that's a COVID claim. We're not going to count that. That's real money. So what's going to happen is you're going to get this. Hopefully, you'll get a new person at the OIR who will say, "Hey, look, I don't care how they did it before. We need more money in this," or the state's going to have to kick in billions with a B, okay, into the JUA again and restart that fiasco, which is bad for the state, bad for the clients, bad for individuals. You do not want to work inside of a state-run policy system. It is bad.
Yeah. I mean, when I got in the business, 20 years ago, there was 11 monopolistic states. And for anyone listening, monopolistic is basically they don't have private insurance in the state. They run it through a state pool. I'm assuming they try and make this into a profit center, right? If you collect more premiums than claims paid out, somehow their net, there's a form of revenue. Now, that number has whittled down from 11 down to just 4 remaining states. Of course, one of them is Ohio, where we're from, has held out. But it just seems that that's not the trend that we would want to go to. So how much of a black eye would that be to mismanage the fund when you have private insurance in there?
Capitalism always works as long as there's not a ceiling or a floor.
Yeah.
Okay. The ceiling is being placed on insurance companies by profit limits. The floor is being set because there's less money coming into the system. Everybody will get squeezed, either insurance carriers leaving, PEOs not being able to be covered, or clients not being able to find coverage will pop first. One of them will.
Yeah. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. You're listening to Everything PEO on Money Talk 1010 AM. I want to throw a curveball out there for our listeners, right? We got a lot of entrepreneurs listening. I consider yourself a serial entrepreneur in the every definition of the word. With the after effects of the Great Resignation still being very real out there, what advice do you have for really any business owner who's struggling to attract, hire, and really retain staff right now? Because that's the number one we're all hearing is, I can't find them, I can't keep them.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear the answer.
Tell me. We can spit it, man.
Pay more.
It's funny you say that.
It's again, capitalism always works. And for me, I'm a math guy, and I also problems at the two ends of the possibility. One's infinite and one is zero. That's it. If you took a guy, you go to the drive-thru, you get your cheeseburger and say, "Hey, I'm starting a new company. I'm willing to pay you $200 an hour."
Yeah, I believe with everything that's going on at the border, there's a clear separation of church and state with mindset. Federal's letting them in. These red states, one at a time, are fighting off the illegal labor. Now the Senate bill come here in July that fights it off even harder. It really has an opportunity, at least in Florida, to kind of be the great American comeback. I mean, you can walk in McDonald's right now and get $15 an hour. Don't tell me as a skilled tradesman building homes, roofing, plumbing, electrical, that making less than that is practical. Now, do you think it has to go down to the benefits route, or just simply kick up a wage to a true day's pay?
So there's a tier system in employment in America, and there's the people who don't have a skill, right? They have a floor. They're going to be taken care of by the state or federally. They're going to get something, probably not enough, but they're going to get something. Then you have skilled labor, who don't know their worth and try and compete by price. They struggle. They struggle to hire people because they can't pay them enough. And then you have skilled or technical labor that know their worth, charge what they're worth, and pay their people well. There is, in my estimation, until you get to $100,000 a year, no one cares about pet insurance. No one cares about free laundry. They pay me.
Yeah.
I love my employees. We paid them through COVID. We take care of them. We have no turnover. We pay them well. Nobody wants a gift card.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's right. I mean, that's really the end all to be all.
It is pay more, hire quickly, fire even quicker. If the guy can't do the job, the person can't do the job. They're not talented. They're not technically adept. Get a new one, but pay more until you get the right people. Okay, and then when somebody wants an appointment, you've got the people to do the job. I mean, you can't even get people to work now because they tell you can't get people. Pay more. I promise you it works.
We've enjoyed having you, man. It's always a fast hour. It's going on 15 years that you called me off of my sign on the side of the road, and it's been a good little partnership.
Oh, there's a good story behind that. Well, maybe we'll do that next time.
Yeah, next time. Well, next week coming up, we've got Kelly Anderson, co-founder of Florida Resource Management, coming in to talk Everything PEO. We're back every Wednesday now, 6 p.m. I've been getting lots of messages. We got a YouTube channel. We're streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, MoneyTalk1010.com, listen live button, and of course here on terrestrial radio. Plenty of ways to catch this hour. Everyone know how this ends. Love God, appreciate your PEO, be kind to your staff, and know we're on a 167-hour break. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Catch you next week.